Hello and welcome to Update by Veg-Economist. My name is Nadine Pilko, and in the next 45 minutes, we are going to deep dive into a region which has significantly changed the novel food landscape. We are going to rethink food and take a look at APAC as a living lab for the future. Before we do so, I want to thank our sponsor, Agri-Food-Tech Expo Asia. Today, I'm looking forward to a conversation with three great experts in the field. Welcome, Megumi Abigail Yoshitomi, President of the Japan Association for Cellular Agriculture, Byron Perez, Program Doctorate at ETH Zurich, and Peter Yu, Program Director at APAC Society for Cellular Agriculture. Welcome together. I'm really curious about what you can tell us about your work, as APAC is a big region. And when we're talking about APAC, most of us think of Singapore in the first place. You all somehow have a connection to Singapore. Byron, would you like to start with your connection and with your introduction about your work?
Sure, I am a doctoral candidate at ETH Zurich, but actually during the first 3 years of my PhD, I was based in Singapore, in the Singapore ETH Center. It's the only external research center that ETH Zurich has in the world. And we were working together with the Singapore National Foundation in a research to find more resilient food and protein sources for Singapore. It was a collaboration project with several other research institutions in Singapore, and our focus was microalgae, a holistic approach from cultivation to processing to designing new products, and also having this consumer perspective of the Singapore region regarding to how they would accept microalgae food products.
Thank you for this quick introduction. Megumi, can you tell us a bit more about your work and connection to Singapore, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm manage the Japan Association for Cell Ag. Also the JACA, in short, is administrative council, administrative organization for the cellular agriculture working team under the Food Tech Public-Private Council, which is hosted by Ministry of Agriculture. Myself is personally one of the advisors to Ministry of Economy to promote the biomanufacturing industry. Our connection to Singapore is has begun over like 5 years ago. Even the chairman of SFA visited visited us for the meeting in Japan, and they have been a very good communicator, and we always make sure to participate in the international conference every year during the SIAW, including the AFTEA. So very nice to meet you.
Thank you, Megumi. Peter, would you like to add? What is your work about? How are you connected to Singapore?
Thank you, Nadine. So hi, everybody. So my name is Peter. I run an industry association called APAC Society for Cellular Agriculture, and we are based in Singapore. So I've spent about 4 years working on this association, and naturally it's been about cultivating meat, precision fermentation, and we try to assist the industry in driving commercialization and work with regulatory coordination and consumer perception and so on and so forth. So, over the time we have built a lot of relationship with other institutions in Singapore. Naturally, we work with A-Star, we work with local polytechnics and institutions, and various government agencies as well, to drive different agendas for the cultivated meat sector. So I'm very happy to be here and happy to share more about sort of the insights that I have from Singapore.
Thank you so much to all of you. I want to say, before we now get started and go deep dive into consumer perception first, please ask your questions with our Q&A section. I will always take a look, and if the audience has any questions, if you want to say something, please go ahead and I will try to put it into our conversation. Now, we're looking at very, very different parts of novel food and the food system, or innovating the food system, algae and cultivated products, but also fermentation. I guess you have a lot of expertise to share. Byron, tradition is always a part of innovation. And could you tell us a bit more about algae? How traditional is algae actually? Because in Germany, where I'm based, I know it's not part of our food system at the moment. And I am quite sure that there would be many people saying, oh, I don't want to taste it or try it. Can you share a bit of your experience in the Singaporean market?
Yes, so microalgae actually has a long history. It has been cultivated in China or in Mexico for several hundred years, but it's not so well known in food. There are a lot of supplements that probably you have seen in the market with spirulina or chlorella, but actually the integration in food products has not reached that level yet. Why? One of the biggest reasons is the cost of production. It has not been so well optimized yet, but we are getting into it. So it can be also introduced as a bulk product, providing more nutrients to complement different food or meat analogs that we are producing, for example. Our project was actually trying to do that, integrating nutrients from different side streams that are available in Singapore into the production of heterotrophic microalgae. So it's kind of a fermentation approach to produce algae in low spaces, but very productive, that produce a lot of biomass in short area and in short time, to give this resilient approach to nutrient production inside of Singapore. Actually, the idea of the whole project was to integrate not only the production, but also the processing and the consumer perspective. So what we saw is that Singapore also has a lot of opening and openness on novel products. People were interested, and microalgae has a small advantage there, that you have heard about macroalgae, so seaweed, and people can relate a bit the microalgae with the macroalgae, and they also perceive a bit these sea flavors on these microalgae and are relatively open to accept the product, especially for younger people that are willing to try new food products.
Maybe also a role could play that it is a region where seafood has greater impact on the market, and they eat more of seafood, right? That's what I'm just thinking about. And meat in general, I don't know, maybe Megumi or Peter, you can tell us a bit more about that, and about the meat consumption also. And I know like Japan is also quite traditional. Megumi, can you give us some insights on the market, on consumer perception and acceptance of cultivated food, and also a bit maybe about the meat market?
Oh yes, sure. So regarding the algae thing, there are also some researches about using the algae for the culture media. Also, there is a product using algae salt, and it's already sold in the market. So I think they have more acceptance in the algae. And when it comes to the cultivated food consumer surveys, of course, it depends on how the questions are designed, but in general, we've seen figures suggesting about 30 to 45% of Japanese consumers showing some level of interest in the new food. Also, it's really matters about like how this food category is named. And in terms of the naming, it's been a very active debate in Japan. So popular names, Saibo which is cell cultured in Japanese, or Saibosei, which is cellular in English, and simply bio, it's cultured in English. And we found that it's when the cultured bio is used, about 19 to 25% of more people confused with aquaculture. And based on these survey results, we convened a meeting under the Ministry of Agriculture's public-private council, and we brought like 17 experts including consumer representatives who had served on government committees or former head of the livestock division in the ministry. And also we invited like companies and retailers who plan to sell cultivated foods, and also journalists. And 15 out of 17 experts supported using the term saibose, which is in English, it's a cellular. Of course, it's only in the Japanese term. And JACA is going to also continue to use the term cultivated when it comes to English communication. But there has been a communication like that. So maybe regarding the naming, the technology experts tend to shorten the tend to use the term which shows the scientific term perspective of the food category and use it as a name. But sometimes those names are not accepted by the consumers, or misunderstanding happens. And regarding the meat, so for the meat sector, even though, of course, Japanese loves meat and wagyu, but we depend 75% of feed from imported feed. So I think the farmers in Japan are suffering from the high volatility of the financial situation. So in that perspective, under the like food supply, food security perspective, I think there is a chance for cultivated food to be accepted by the consumers.
About security later on, because I think that is increasing, gains increasing importance out there in general globally. Peter, I know you've done research for the Chinese market. Could you tell us a bit more about consumer acceptance there, to get a bit close this topic on how far you are actually in the region for different countries?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Nadine. So in China, we just conducted a cultivated meat study. I think it's one of the first there. And we did it in tier 1 cities. So Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen. Overall, I think what we see, okay, it aligns with consumers elsewhere in the sense of what is the most important thing that drives consumer demand: product quality, what it tastes, the price as well, but also nutritional content of the food. I think those are the 3 main sort of overarching drivers for the Chinese population. Now, when it comes to specifically, novel foods and specifically cultivated meat, we find that about only 10% of the respondents are aware of the concept of, this type of food today. And a significant portion of those 10% are still confused and don't have a full clarity of, if cultivated is the same as plant-based, and so on and so forth. So there is still, however, the majority of people have heard about it, but don't know what it is, right? So, and I think about a third of the population never heard about the concept. So this is in the tier 1 cities. The main point here is that about 3/4 of the population are willing to try novel foods. And 10% are very, very eager. About 25% are rather willing, and 43%, what I have here, is would try it at least once, right? So out of this entire population, about 20% say they don't want to try it. So, so this is, I think, is very, very promising information that we get from the Chinese market. There's no cultivated meat in China. But what we can see, and we can extrapolate that with other markets like Singapore and so on, is that introduction, this is what I mentioned here is theoretical data, but introduction brings forth familiarity, which drive consumer acceptance and perception of the food in itself upwards generally. So I think the benchmark for China is quite high. So I'm very, very optimistic about the market there. I think the people and the reasons why, they would try the novel foods. They say, okay, they have a love for trying new foods. They're very curious about the innovative foods as well. But health reasons, they are more options are of the food that the food cuisine is important for them too. They also have a lot of trust in that it's strictly regulated. And I think that we talk about that later on, but food security is an important point, and environmental sustainability reasons. So with that order of importance, but so this is in tier 1 cities. I think that, again, I would say the numbers are very promising. And I think, again, in the next few years, when this becomes more introduced, it has a really, optimistic introduction in China going forward. Yeah.
So education plays a crucial role here also. I mean, if the 10%, I think, only knew about the concept, if I got it right, and then but 80% would say they would try it and as soon as they know about the concept, right? Is that correct?
Yeah,
that's always interesting. It's what.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Education, public perception, it ties into how it's portrayed. So media play a big role. I think how we portray it in media. For example, cultivated meat, maybe it's food, like algae is food, but maybe we don't want to showcase it in a petri dish or in something. I think you have to get in the right messaging, right? We see, for example, in Korea, there are coming out K-dramas with cultivated meat centralized into the story, and how it's portrayed into the media is very important. So we see like different movements shaping the influence of it. I think government plays a big role too in their messaging and how they regulate in influencing public perception as well. But ultimately, down the line, public perception will be shaped by, in my opinion, by how it tastes, the sort of the mouthfeel and how you can consume the food in comparison to conventional meat, and the price. And those factors ultimately down the line will be the biggest influences. But today we see different nuances as well.
Yeah, definitely price and taste. Those are the two drivers, of course. But you also mentioned health. I didn't really want to talk about health, but as this is actually a quite important issue in the EU and also ultra-processed foods, I would like to ask you whether you can give us insights, all of you three, on which role health really plays, because, and this is really like, I don't have that much knowledge about the region, but in the EU, we need healthier products, definitely, but you actually they have in the APAC region, in many countries, they already have a quite healthy diet. Is that correct? Like, is that a very crucial part of novel food? Megumi, also for Japan, if you have insights there.
So in Japan, I heard about this comment from one of the major food company, but Japanese market having one of the widest variety of processed food, like frozen food and convenience store food, and all are very widely accepted by consumers. So of course there is a trend of seeing like high health risk for toward processed food, but Japanese market itself also embraces the high quality such food. So I think the market has some sort of acceptability compared to EU market. And if I may add, you may able to imagine, but Japanese people loving science fiction and robots, and even in the ethical perspectives, they embrace such a new technology as a nature. So it really depends. Of course, it really depends on the price and taste, just as Peter mentioned, but also the story that we need is always matters. So as JACA, we currently engage with the two expert organizations. First one is about expert for the media relations, and we several times in a year we are hosting a study session only for the media. And based on the communication with them, we are building a communication guideline so that the company's IR or like company's communication division can use it as a guideline. And the second one is we've hired we are hiring a branding expert to because we've discussed about the nomenclature for the first half of this year. So as a second half of this year, we are engaging with the branding company to create a story which will be used as a set with the nomenclature.
Stories definitely are important. Byron, you are taking insights from Singapore to Switzerland to Zurich. How does this really work? Because I guess people are very different, cultures very different. Do you see the same openness in Switzerland? And how would you see a branding there for algae products, microalgae products?
Yeah, actually, it's very interesting because the situation in Switzerland and Singapore are very different. You observe in Singapore that there is more urgency and more pressure to find solutions for their food security. You have 90% of the food being imported and a lot of risks that value chain can be disrupted. So Singapore is more open and more keen, and I think that also more aware to food security. And therefore, they also push and accept novel solutions, out of the box options in the different ways to produce food. In Switzerland, that is not happening at the current point, but can happen in the future with more water stress and more or less arable land available. So actually, it's one of the motivations of our group to try to bring the solutions and the basic research that we develop in Switzerland to Singapore, that it's a scenario that really needed and that helps to prove and to test these technologies to then be translated. But you can also see the different opinions of the consumers in both countries. In Singapore, our consumer research showed that people are not so keen to buy meat analogs like in Switzerland. In Switzerland, for example, chicken analog is very well received. People love it and they're familiar with the flavor. But in Singapore, people were actually going for seafood analogs. They wanted to see abalone analog, shrimp analog, fish analog, and the microalgae was fitting into this design of seafood products. So it's interesting to see two perspectives and also the faster acceleration and better push in Singapore for these novel solutions.
Now we've touched upon the security issue very many times. I've heard it in all of your answers somehow that the security issue came in, and I know that there will be the Agri-Food Tech Expo in Asia in November, and you will have the APAC Society for Cellular Agriculture has launched a pavilion there. Peter, is security actually one issue you want to talk about for the whole region?
Yeah, I think security is a very important topic, what you mentioned, and I think that maybe it's a sort of like a misconception among many countries that believe that the food supply is secure today, or dependent on it today to dictate the future directory. I think that's wrong. I think, and a lot of lessons can be drawn from Singapore in that perspective, with Singapore really pushing forth the ability to look into the future and to safeguard and find additional ways. And for example, cultivated meat, what it really is a complementary source of protein and complementary source for of protein for the future. Now, regarding the expo, I think that it will be very, very good if companies can participate, especially from Europe. I think for the companies there, it's really by getting the market access, right? Asia is projected to drive one of the largest share of alternative protein demand globally. Singapore really serves as a trusted sort of entry point with strong trade connectivity. And then secondly, is tied into that is regulatory leadership, right? Singapore is one of the first places in the world, or the first place in the world to give the approval for novel food cultivated meat, and is working well on the way on many different types of products, including fermentation-based, hybrid product, and so on. right? And third is really about the collaboration opportunity in the export too. So if any companies out there from a novel food perspective interested in Singapore, looking forward to come to the expo, do connect with me, and I can put you on a spot for our Singapore pavilion there.
That great to know, definitely, because I think there are so many insights, and building the industry globally means we have to also collaborate. Of course, Singapore somehow is the lighthouse, and that's where we enter the market. Megumi, what would you tell people or companies more for the Japanese market? I know you sent me an article or a paper, and which stated that the Japanese authorities changed their minds somehow in cultivated meat in last year in November. I hope that's right. Can you tell us why, and how the market is interesting for companies who maybe want to enter there?
Yes, so so actually the detailed Japanese government discussion status is can be available in our website, JACA website. So if you're interested, please go there. But in brief, so the Japanese right now, the safe cultivated food market launch guideline has been being created under the Consumer Affairs Agency's expert committee, and they started the very serious discussion from November, last November, for hopefully for two reasons. First was that in April of 2024, there was a food safety incident related to functional food, which was caused by red yeast rice food supplement. And because of that, the consumers' fear over the novel food in general arose. And the governments maybe thought that we need to be kind of be serious about establishing a safety guideline before company start to sell a new type of food in general. And also after for the first 6 years of the last fiscal year, they've been seriously working on the red yeast rice issue. So that's why their conversation about cultivated food started from November. Maybe it should be much earlier without such food safety incident, but it was delayed. That's maybe one. And the second reason, I hope that 1 month before the government started the serious discussion, JACA submitted a proposal to both Consumer Affairs Agency and the Ministry of Agriculture, which included recommendations to clarify the procedures for selling cultivated food. So my hope that this proposal also helped Consumer Affairs agencies to gather experts in the expert committee and start a serious discussion. And for the advice for companies who are looking for the Japanese market is maybe one critical thing is about, so when you engage with Japanese, of course, please find a great partner in Japan first. But in addition to that, when you engage with Japanese media, it really helps if you frame your message around the benefits for Japan, why this innovation matters to Japanese consumers or to Japanese industry or to society here. This is because the current political climate, so with recent elections like Japan First and more conservative voices are gaining momentum. So this means that when you combine a brand new type of food with a foreign company, there is a chance for unexpected reactions from consumers. So my advice is, like, if you already have potential partners in Japan, talk with them carefully about how to communicate, and they will know the sensitivities and also help you avoid missteps. And also we are, as I mentioned, we are building a communication guideline for as a first step for Japanese companies, but in the end, we will also translate it into English version.
Thank you so much for those insights. That's very detailed for Japan. Peter, I don't know, do you have any more insights, maybe on a general regulatory status quo for the region? I know you've recently also initiated collaboration with Australia, with the Australia Association for Cellular Agriculture. And maybe first, to get started, because we have a question here, how far the products have reached, the cultivated products have reached the grocery stores in Singapore? Do you have any insights on this?
Okay, so there was a lot of questions there. Not sure which one I should tackle first. Maybe I'll tackle Singapore. I think that currently it's sold at Hoover's, so it hasn't progressed as much as I would like to at this stage. But things, it takes time. Okay, there's also selling, I think Wow is selling through a restaurant as well. But I'm sure that there will be more products out there in the market, and I hope it will reach the supermarket in not too distant future. Now, regarding regulation and policy, my take on this is very, very important right now. Is I think that we see many countries are interested. Many countries are building frameworks and putting forth a pathway to commercialize the products, and they're in different stages, and they follow different models to make it happen, right? And I'm talking about countries like Thailand have a working very, very diligently on board. They have a framework. We're talking about Malaysia are conducting a feasibility study and being presented to the Prime Minister office later on this month, I think, or maybe the next month. And so on. So many countries are developing, working very, very diligently. From my take, and the most important part for the industry to develop holistically would be regulatory coordination and the ability to really work with many different elements together and consensus building behind the frameworks for regulation. The reason is that, to set the right pathway and to ensure interoperability and to ensure that companies can commercialize across the region, it needs to be strong interoperability. And this is often deep-rooted in very strong, global data that can be shared and collaborated on. So we need to have the flexibility and the ambiguity of the frameworks developed right now. So, and indirectly, by building this consensus framework, we can also drive to really encourage other countries in the region to develop framework, right? So, and the last point is that very big global organizations like the FAO, WHO, Codex Alimentarius, ISO even, all of which I've been working on with are actively engaged in novel foods. And there has been developments in the last few years, and there will be more developments going forward in this next few years too. And I think when those developments are being perfected, it really opens up a gateway for many countries to open up a pathway to commercialize globally for cultivated meat too. So I think that 2020, going into 2030, but maybe end of this decade, we're going to see a different environment from today. And I think that Asia Pacific has a tremendous amount of potential. And I think that many countries will find their niche, right? Some countries will be heavy on building these cultivated meat companies. Some others will be strong on scale up too, which many companies are currently looking towards to engage and build out too. So I think very exciting times.
Absolutely. And regarding this, I would like to later on in a few minutes talk about also whether there are maybe regional expertises already globally, like APAC is going to be the hub for, EU is going to be the hub for XYZ. But before that, I would like to touch upon microalgae also in regard to novel food, Byron. I know when we talked before, you said you need water resources and local resources. How feasible is this actually? And is microalgae, in the way you're using it or what you're developing, also a novel food? Does that apply there? Maybe also you can elaborate on how you can use it for cultivation. I don't know, maybe this is, Megumi said, algae is part of the media preparation. So yeah, sorry, those were many questions again.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the biggest benefits of microalgae is that compared to other traditional crops, actually takes less time to be produced and use less area, but you also need water to produce. One of the good flexibilities of the microalgae production is that you have a species that can grow in seawater that, for example, is available in Singapore. You would still need to purify it, but other species need to be cultivated in drinking water, that then it will be a competition with water resources for the population. But we are working on reducing the amount of water that it's needed. Of course, we try to reuse the cultivation medium as best as possible and to give the microalgae. And that's one of the biggest benefits compared to traditional agriculture, that you can control exactly which nutrients you are providing to the cells. So it's very efficient. So there are no nutrients left in the medium at the end when you have a very well-controlled process. The microalgae that we were working in Singapore is very interesting because it produces a yellow color. So it's not the traditional green microalgae. What helps to add these microalgae in different food products. For example, there had been already pilot scale testing of extrusion of these microalgae together with pea protein to make meat analogs, and you increase the content of vitamins, you increase the content of polyunsaturated fatty acids, making the meat analog not only protein rich, but also complementary with other nutrients that are important for the population, of course. But yeah, the limitation, as you said, sometimes you have contamination. I think that's also a problem that cellular agriculture faces when you have really big reactors and you have ideal conditions where bacteria can also grow. Sterility is a big problem and a big part of the cost of keeping those sterile conditions. But now we're going towards different type of microalgae. It's called extremophiles that can grow at very low pH and at very high temperature. So bacteria cannot grow in those cases, and the microalgae can be grown in a less expensive setup because you don't need to sterilize everything because bacteria cannot compete with this microalgae. But of course, these microalgae is not the common microalgae that have been cultivated for a long time. So they are in the process to being approved as grass status or novel food in the European Union. Already one of the components of these microalgae that's called phycocyanin. I don't know if you have ever heard of this. It's a very interesting pigment, the only blue pigment that is naturally produced, let's say, and it's used in food industry, traditionally made by a cyanobacteria that it's grass status. But the phycocyanin of this extremophile has now been approved. And the approval of the biomass probably will take some more time, but gives a lot of opportunities of improving the process, reducing prices, and giving more options for different nutrient sources.
Thank you so much, Byron. I have the feeling actually I could do a 45-minute talk with each of you about the different topics because there's so much more to know and so many details. But for the last minutes, I would like to touch upon, yeah, again, a bit of, how regions work together. How important is it that, the APAC countries are working together, collaborating, sharing knowledge? What can we learn from each other? Because in the EU, we see that there are very many different governments and the openness is very different. What can we take from your approaches? How can we learn from each other? And what would be, like the next thing we have to think of in the EU? And this also maybe touches upon the security issue, because I did a bit of research and said how important is supply dependency, and or like how often are we dependent in our food supply, and how open are we for novel food in different countries? And that was just a quick research, but you could see that the more we are dependent, the more open we also are. And yeah, so how can we, translate this dependency and the need into other arguments for developing the industry? Now that was a lot, but Yeah. Peter, do you want to start off maybe and give us some insights in what we can learn and take from the APAC region and how you streamline the issues there?
Yeah, it's a very loaded question. I think that EU is a bit unique in the sense that it's under one umbrella, European Union. There are many different member states, and it's governed by EFSA, who gives the food approvals. And it's also a political decision that is dictating there. So you're all under the same umbrella, and some countries are for novel foods and some are against. And I think that's natural. We see that across many different industries too. So how do you tackle that? I think that what we're trying in Asia is a bit different, right? Because we're different countries here, but coordination as much as possible. And I think that what really needs to be driven in Europe is like public perception. It will be key. So the member states that are really proponents to the industry needs to focus not only on their own country, but throughout the entire region. Some work has already been doing that as well, but that will be very, very important on the European level. Public perception, I think that, and I think regulation is ongoing and is working. I think that, that's supported already. I think religious labeling will be very important to work with too. That's been undertaken here in Asia, specifically when it comes to like halal certification and so on. And putting frameworks that allow this type of food to be consumed by all kinds of populations within different borders too. So, some of the works for APAC SA, one of the pivotal work has been coordination, right? So we have brought a forum, we built a forum with 30 different experts, 10 different countries, and really trying to build consensus building information, right? That being published in peer-reviewed journals. And I think that can really bring credence and to development. And I think that similar efforts can be done in Europe to really help drive the novel food agenda there as well, right? And ultimately, I think that the industry will benefit from a global sort of collective collaboration on these very important topics too. So I think that we're moving from more unilateral developments to more a global movement. And I think that in the next few years, we'll be seeing bigger type of movements coming forth that can really benefit everybody. Yeah.
Thank you. Megumi, would you like to add, what can we take from Japan to Germany or any other EU country and the collaboration on APAC level?
Yes, so maybe the biggest hurdle in Japan is the lack of resource in the regulatory science field. And I think this is also happening in other countries as well. So in addition to like some actions to promote the industry, we also need to be supportive for the G2G communication. And in that perspective, like lack of regulatory scientist resource, and also for example, in Japan, we sometimes communicate with local politicians because the government is lack of human resource and they're suffering. So not only like asking for outputs, but also creating a communication or narrative from the like political side, so that the government can increase more resource for the novel food section. Also, another thing is that like one country's narrative affect other countries, like European narrative affects Japanese consumers' acceptance. So what JACA is avoiding to do is like making the farmers as bad guys when it comes to the environment, and I think so as JACA, we avoid communication using the environmental burden from the agricultural sector, but we try to focus on the resource efficiency of this new type of food ingredients. And we position this category as a high quality food ingredients, which can be used for either not only for the plant-based food to increase the meat flavor, but also we can use it as a combination with existing meat to suppress the volatility of the retail price of like ham and sausage. So we try to position it as a new food ingredient rather than something which like currently the existence of cultivated foods sometimes imply the farmers' environmental costs, but we try to avoid such context. So maybe that's one method.
That's very important, and ingredients, I think, is a key topic. Byron, I guess that also applies to microalgae. Do you want to add something from Singapore to Switzerland to the EU? I mean, we're very close, our markets. Anything you would say we need to change and do, in context of novel food?
I think that it was very interesting to see in Singapore that the research institutions and upscaling opportunities are very well connected. So you have a lot of entrepreneurial spirit in the universities, but you also have the resources or the places where you can transform your idea from the lab bench to a pilot scale, and that can also be tested in the consumers. So I think that in Europe, sometimes it's a bit more tricky or hard to get access to these upscaling platforms. And I think that could be a very good opportunity and something that I found very interesting in Singapore.
Thank you so much. I am very grateful for all the insights you've shared today. Thank you for your questions out there in the audience. Hopefully we'll see each other on 18th of September for our next session on retail, and maybe we will see us at the expo in Asia or in Germany at a certain event. Have a nice day.